Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. We are really excited to bring you this panel today. The International Advertising Association is proud to present this group of experts. We are going to be talking about self-regulation, advertising self-regulation. Too often, it's a greatly misunderstood friend of the industry. You know, we all have a strange friend, perhaps, and a friend that you don't really know that well, you don't really understand them, you don't really include them, you don't want to be paying all their bills. Too often, that's the way advertising self-regulation is perceived by the professionals in the advertising industry. And so we are going to work to help you get to know this strange friend of the advertising industry, advertising self-regulation. Today's panel, you'll meet that strange friend, and once you get to know them, perhaps you'll want to get better acquainted. I'm going to introduce our panel of experts in a second. First, I'll introduce the 4 topics that we'll be discussing today. 4 topics. 1, digital and social media. These are the evolving hot topics in the industry. The industry is changing exponentially. Digital and social media is on top of that. So we'll discuss the role of influencers, the need to respect consumer privacy, and the matrix of privacy regulations. Number 2, the change in societal expectations regarding health and diet, sustainability, gender, race. Number 3, new technologies. How is that being used? Artificial intelligence or other innovations for the self-regulatory organizations to become more efficient. And number 4, how the SROs interface with government and the local, meaning the country's governmental authorities, and how do they work with each other internationally. Please, this is a conversation. Please send your questions in under the comments section there on the right, and we'll take as many as time allows at the end of the presentations. So let's get started with the introductions of those sitting around this virtual table that we have here. I hope that you imagine that we're all sitting together with you. Starting in Asia, Manisha Kapoor, the Secretary General of the Advertising Standards Council of India. I'm going to ask each speaker, I will introduce each speaker quickly, and then ask each one to introduce their SRO, their self-regulatory organization, and just tell us all what makes their organization distinctive. So let's start with Manisha Kapoor, Secretary General of the Advertising Standards Council of India.
Thank you, Carla. ASCI, or the Advertising Standards Council of India, was established in 1985. So we've been around for about 36 years in India. We look at advertising content regulation, self-regulation. We, of course, work closely with the industry as well as the government and other stakeholders. We look at 4 tenets of advertising content. So we look at truth in advertising, we look at harm, we look at offense, and we look at fairness in competition. So this is the remit that we have for ourselves in India, and these are very, very exciting times for all of us at self-regulation, and very, very happy to be here discussing this with all of you.
Thank you. Let's go to Australia. Richard Bean, Executive Director of Ad Standards Australia. Richard, tell us about your organization.
Everybody, it's great to be with you. Ad Standards has been around in its current form since the late 90s in Australia, and I don't know if it makes it unique, but all of our decisions on complaints that we receive are made by a group of citizens. We have no expert panel experts involved in our panel. We don't have industry people. We have as diverse a group of citizens as we can put together to represent the Australian community, and they're the ones that make all the decisions. I just run the office.
That's amazing. So you don't have any professionals but for you, Richard.
That's right. Well, and my staff, of course.
Right. Now, coming to the United States, Mary Engel, Executive Vice President Policy at the BBB National Programs, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And I have to tell you that I'm on the board of Mary's organization. Proud to be. Mary?
To more than a dozen independent industry self-regulatory and dispute resolution programs, primarily in the area of advertising and privacy. In the advertising area specifically, we have several programs. Our oldest program is the National Advertising Division, or the NAD. It's been around for over 50 years now, and it primarily resolves disputes between competitors. So one advertiser will challenge another advertiser's advertising. But we also bring cases based on our own monitoring, evaluating them for misleadingness. If, for the most part, advertisers comply voluntarily, they have the option of appealing an adverse decision to our National Advertising Review Board. And if there is non-compliance, we refer the case to the National Advertising Regulator in the US, which is the Federal Trade Commission. We also have a Children's Advertising Review Unit, which looks at advertising directed to kids under 13 and has specific guidelines for the fair and appropriate advertising to kids of that young age. And we also operate the Direct Selling Self-Regulatory Council, which monitors the advertising of direct sellers and their sales force members, including multi-level marketers, for claims about earnings potential as well as the benefits of the products that they sell.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go quickly to London, to the UK. Guy Parker is the Chief Executive of the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, a very strong, robust organization. Guy.
Thank you very much, Carla. Lovely to be here. Yeah, the UK, we're the UK regulator of ads in all media, including online. We're in the business of making sure that the content and targeting of ads is legal, decent, honest, and truthful. And we're a bit of a mix of self-regulation and co-regulation, but industry support is vital for us. We're big believers in ad regulation being more effective if industry buys into it, if it informs the development of our regulation, as well as properly funding us, of course. But our administration of our codes has got to be independent of the industry. And that's the balance we're constantly seeking to strike, harness the power of the industry, but regulate independently so we can protect the public, particularly kids and the vulnerable, as well as making sure there's a level playing field for responsible businesses. Strategically, we're meeting the pace and scale challenge of regulating online advertising by rebalancing away from reactive complaints casework, important though that still is for us, towards a lot more proactive tech-assisted intelligence gathering, monitoring, and enforcement. And our use of tech, including machine learning, is key to that.
Well, I'm very glad that you talked about the independence of the organization and independent of self-regulation. That's something we'll be coming back to throughout the panel. Let's go to Paris. We all want to be in Paris. Stéphane Martin, I think I've known Stéphane longer than anyone else on the panel, and he is the Director General of the Regulation Authority for Advertising for France. Stéphane.
Oui, bonjour. Hi, everybody. Of course, we say Autorité de Régulation Professionnelle de la Publicité. You can translate it as the Advertising Standard Authority. And we had in our remit in concert with civil society, because we had associated bodies, all chaired by personalities independent of the industry, which has been funding based since 1935. The brands and the agencies, the media, all the media and all the technology serving advertising. Our funding is based on annual membership and service rendered mainly prior to the broadcast of messages, copy advice, and in France, all the TV ads, we pre-clear all the TV ads, like Clearcast in UK, for example.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you pronounced the name of your organization. You're better than I am at your French, for sure. Now, let's talk about the international world and introduce to you, I'm proud to introduce the director of ICAS, the International Council for Advertising Self-Regulation, Sybil Stansou. So Sybil, tell us about what ICAS is.
Thank you, Carla. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. So ICAS is not an SRO. So as the contrary to the other associations, we are there to bring together the SROs across the globe. But not only the SROs, but also the advertising industry. So we bring together other national, regional, or international bodies, and together, to make sure that advertising is responsible worldwide. Together with EASA, which is our European sister organization and member, so the European Advertising Standards Alliance, we cover currently 41 markets across the globe. ICAS is 5 years old, so we're a fairly new organization, but we're of course building on the expertise of our members. EASA, for example, is 30 years old, but many of our SROs have been around for 50 or even 80 years.
Thank you. ICAS is a great organization, and through it, all these organizations, all the SROs around the world can connect. Self-regulation is a baseline for advertising. Self-regulation provides a baseline for integrity and ethics for all brands, and that allows brands to thrive. As we said at the outset, advertising and media is changing exponentially. Let's jump right into the issues which are top of mind, with digital being top of mind, with influencer marketing. Wall Street Journal just had an article about one of the top TikTok stars making $17 million, more than many multinational CEOs. Influencers are hugely important, influential. Manisha, let's jump to you and ask, I understand that ASCII, your organization, recently launched an influencer guideline in 2021. Tell us about this. What are the plans? What are the challenges in monitoring influencer marketing?
Thanks, Carla. Yes, we did launch, our guidelines earlier last year. So, in fact, in the middle of last year, and I think again, thanks to ICAS, we were in touch with some of the other self-regulatory organizations, and France particularly had done a program, that we were kind of looking to learn from in terms of monitoring. So we deployed, after the guidelines, which of course largely were around the disclosure of, the fact that certain content was actually paid promotions, because the lines between content and what is paid, is very, very, difficult for consumers to make out. And so therefore, the key cornerstone of the guideline was really around disclosures. We were very happy that we were able to reach out to a technology partner to help us monitor influencer content, because of course there is this endless content, right? And I think beyond a point, all of us are going to find it difficult to manually monitor the content that's available, particularly on the digital platforms. And therefore, we've been doing that. We've been, of course, fine-tuning things as they go along. But I think, all recognize that this is just the beginning. This whole area is so vast. The number of new influencers that come into the market every day are just so many. And, many of them are not really, many of them are just teenagers or very, very young people who've not really done traditional advertising or marketing, right? So it's very challenging. I think in this influencer space particularly, I think education and monitoring need to go hand in hand. And I think that's what we are basing our approach on. And, we'll continue to build on that.
And they're young and need education, but they're making lots of money. I want to ask Guy and Mary a question in a second, but first I'm going to ask Richard in Australia, because you have some unique experiences with the Australian Influencer Marketing Council. Tell us about that, Richard, please.
It's very interesting because our relationship, of course, is principally with the advertisers, and the influencers are really just the medium, but they are critical in this area. And indeed, they, where a problem arises, it's often the influencer that suffers the consequences as much as the advertiser. So we have an important relationship with the Australian Influencer Marketing Council, which is there to support the influencers and is critical to educating influencers about their responsibilities as purveyors of advertising. And that's been very important for us because, of course, it's the influencers that everybody knows. They're the ones that are out in the market. And although we largely have a very good relationship with very professional advertisers and their agencies, sometimes the influencer is the weak link in terms of experience, knowledge, and so on.
Guy, with the current focus, hearing what you just heard about influencer marketing and the regulations, what role is there for advertising, self-regulation, and co-regulation, perhaps, in the years ahead? How does that affect? You have a lot of rules and regulations in the UK. How have you navigated this?
I think there's a huge role for self-regulation in the years ahead. I mean, there's going to be more statutory regulation in places like the UK. There's a lot of government interest in that at the moment, but the opportunity is for that to strengthen systems like the ASA and not undermine us. We're generally very well respected in the UK by the government, by Parliament, by other regulators. So we expect to continue to be the frontline ad regulator in the UK. But we will, without a doubt, we're going to need to work even more closely with other regulators, particularly Ofcom, which is the media regulator in the UK in the years ahead. And let's not lose sight of the benefits that we can bring by doing that. And these are the benefits of advertising self-regulation. It tends to be principles-based. It tends to be media neutral. Self-regulation, ad self-regulation at least, is much faster and more flexible than the law. It's developed with industry know-how, and it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything. So, I mean, I see the shifts in the tectonic plates of regulation, digital regulation, that we're experiencing now to different degrees. We're at the sharp end of it in the UK. I see it as being a big opportunity for ad self-regulatory bodies like us.
Mary, America, the United States is a little bit different than other countries. We don't have these ad codes that some of the other countries have. We are based on the statutes and regulations from the Federal Trade Commission. I should share that Mary has an illustrious career with the Federal Trade Commission for many years, and we all loved Mary when she was a regulator, and we love her now. How has this different approach from the U.S., how has this affected the ability of self-regulation to impact the digital community and digital advertising?
Yeah, I think it's actually made us more flexible. I mean, as you said, we do follow the laws, guidelines, et cetera, of the Federal Trade Commission, but we're able to respond to misleading ads in the marketplace wherever and however they occur. And in the case of influencer marketing, our NAD has actually challenged individual influencers, whereas the FTC has not yet brought a case against influencers. So, for example, 5 years ago, we brought a case against the Kardashians, who were hawking a product called Fit Tea on social media and weren't disclosing that they were paid to do that. And in another similar area to influencer marketing was native advertising. And NAD actually brought cases underlining the need for a clear and conspicuous disclosure when the content is actually paid advertising as opposed to editorial before the FTC issued its guidance on native advertising. So, I think we, as Guy said, we're nimble and flexible, and we can respond really more quickly than the regulators can. And I say that as a former regulator.
She is a recovered regulator, as I call her. Let's take a quick poll before we move on. I'm going to go quickly around the room. I'm asking if you have brought a case against influencers. Mary, we know that you have. Richard, have you brought a case against influencers?
Well, the cases are against the advertisers, but absolutely in influencer marketing, we have quite a number this year.
Okay, Stefan.
Also, we have a few cases, of course, 3 complaints.
And Manisha.
Yes, we have. So yeah, we started monitoring from the middle of last year, and we have over 700 cases that we've registered. Yes.
Over 700 cases. I hope that at least one influencer is on this listening so that they can share that information. And Guy, you have brought cases, right?
We brought hundreds of cases.
Hundreds of cases.
And brands.
I asked that question because I actually have talked to influencers who think the rules do not apply to them. And so I knew what the answer was, but obviously influencer marketing is regulated by self-regulation and the law. Let's move on. Privacy regulation, which is another angle of digital marketing and digital advertising. We all want to respect consumer privacy. There's a matrix of government regulation. The cookie has crumbled around the world. Advertisers are scrambling, trying to figure out a new solution to personalized marketing, addressable advertising. Stefan, Guy, Mary, how have you addressed the evolution of privacy regulation, both due to the GDPR in the EU and the lack of laws, federal laws? There's 50 different states and 30 some different state laws on privacy, but there's no one federal law in the United States. So Stefan, Guy, Mary, how have you addressed this evolution of privacy regulation within self-regulation?
Oh, let's remind that self-regulation is first and foremost legal advertising and therefore complies with the applicable text. But self-regulation codes are not a repetition of the law, if only because the juries, our juries, does not replace the judges. Or in the case of cookies, the public data protection authorities, like the CNIL in France, for example. But our first codes covered all these issues, in fact, but now they refer most of all to the European text to be applied in an appendix, for example, in the French digital code. But indirectly, it is the development of the addressed television advertising that is leading to an increase in apps, for example, in apps precurrence activity by increasing the number of advertisers accessing TV advertising, the number of messages versions, for example. So the benefits of programmatic advertising must not degrade the quality of the audiovisual advertising we all know, carried by the traditional advertisers and broadcasters. So, and because we also have in Europe the European Audiovisual Media Services Directive, we also apply these texts.
And Mary.
Yeah, so several of our programs deal with privacy. It's always an important issue and become even more prominent in the last few years, obviously. So one of our programs is the Digital Advertising Accountability Program, which basically provides compliance for the principles of the Digital Advertising Alliance, which I know there are similar versions throughout the world, basically providing consumers with a notice and choice regarding the interest-based advertising that they receive. And of course, as you mentioned, with cookies probably going away next year, there's been a lot of concern about what takes cookies' place. How can we monitor that? And I know folks are looking at alternatives, email or phone-based consent mechanisms to continue to offer consumers choice about the ads that they receive. So that's something that we're following very closely. As these technologies develop, there has to be an accountability half of it. So, and that's something that we're staying on top of. Also, we were recently recognized by the U.S. government to provide certify companies' compliance with Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation requirements for data transfer among countries and under something called cross-border privacy rules. And we actually think those provide a lot of potential, not outside of the APEC region, throughout the globe as well. So that's something we're following very closely.
And to be clear, Stefan and Mary, your organizations are bringing cases to enforce privacy expectations.
Exactly. So the companies, and in the US, companies don't have to, even if they haven't agreed to comply with the rules, we can still hold them accountable to the rules. And if they don't voluntarily comply, they usually do, but then they get referred to the regulator.
And Guy, in the UK, now post-Brexit, you don't have to worry about GDPR at all, do you?
Yeah, we do, because it's in our law. It's snuck in before we left the European Union. But I don't think the cookie is quite crumbled yet. I mean, I'm English. We have a great tradition in England of dunking our cookies, or biscuits as we call them, into our tea, and then eating them. And if you leave it too long, because the cookie goes soggy, it kind of starts to dissolve. And I think we're at that stage. It hasn't yet fallen to pieces and crumbled, but it's about to, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. We've obviously been focused in the UK on online behavioural advertising. We've played a role in recent years in helping to provide enhanced notice of and choice over being targeted with interest-based ads. But we're now in a bit of a holding pattern because the UK Data Protection Authority, which is an organisation called the ICO, has got an ongoing investigation into ad tech, specifically into the open RTB market, and we don't yet know how that is going to pan out. And of course, we've also got the big sort of market-led changes that are happening at the moment as a result of the kind of browser level changes, etc. So I don't think anyone really knows what programmatic is going to be like in a year or two's time, but we're watching with great interest and are ready to play our role.
Yeah, I should share. We're covering a lot this morning. We're not covering a lot. There's a lot going on with the industry. There's a lot happening as far as industry trying to address the change in the media content environment as well as the advertising environment. We're talking about paid for media. We're paid for advertising. We're not talking about the non-paid for content and any issues regarding truth on the non-paid content. There's a lot of issues we could be covering. And so I think Guy just alluded to a little bit. Sybil and Manisha, outside of the European sphere and the American sphere, how are you navigating this, Sybil, from what you know in the international community, and Manisha in India? You guys are very technologically advanced over all of us. How are you addressing privacy in India?
So internationally, just briefly, we have been increasingly looking into the issue of privacy because it's really important. And we have members that really deal with it, have really strong programs. So what we have done also in the past is to just bring them all together. SROs can explain what they do and others can learn from them. So this is just the main role also of ICAST, to just share information, best practice. But as Guy said, actually, so many things are now evolving. We need to see what is happening with technology. We need to see what is happening with regulation. We need to monitor and just see where we can play a role, where we can help industry be compliant.
And Manisha, with privacy in India?
Yeah, so I think there is, we still don't have a very firm regulatory framework yet on the issue. So there are, of course, concerns, that are being discussed in the public domain. But I think we are still probably some while away from having a very specific regulatory framework around this issue.
Okay. I will address the audience is asking questions. I'm making some notes about the questions being asked. As I said at the outset, we're going to try to come back and answer all those questions. One of the questions was, Manisha, to post your influencer guidelines. We'll try to figure out how to do that, and we'll get those influencer guidelines posted so that everyone sees that. I'm going to go on to the next area that I said we'd discuss, which are the issues regarding advertising's role in society. Self-regulation in advertising continually demonstrates adaptability. Self-regulation, like advertising, has to adapt to the needs of the industry, the expectations of citizens, and also, importantly, the expectations of regulators. But does advertising reflect societal norms, or does advertising have an obligation to lead societal change? And although the self-regulators are regulators, how does self-regulation address a responsibility that advertising may have to society? There are a lot of issues that society is addressing today, from food and health issues to the environment to gender issues, race, children. Let's start in Australia with an issue that's common to many in the industry. We've addressed the issue in many different ways. Advertising addressed to children and food advertising. Richard, you've shared with me that just a couple of months ago, the Australian SRO implemented a new code regarding food advertising directed to children. What's happened, and how have you addressed food advertising addressed to children in Australia?
I think, Carla, one of the great advantages of self-regulation is its ability to respond quickly to changes in social expectations around issues like food, for example, and others, of course, environmental questions and so on, gender identity. These issues, attitudes to issues like this change quickly, and self-regulatory systems are able to respond quickly, much better than formal government regulatory systems, legislative systems, and so on. And yes, we have recently revised our food code. We used to have a number of codes. They've been consolidated and simplified with particular emphasis on marketing to children. There's now a uniform age, for example, which is under 15 for this area of regulation in Australia. And we've also regularised a definition of occasional foods, as they're called in Australia, based on Australia and New Zealand food standards. So that's uniform, set by a respected independent body. So there's no longer any argument about what is or is not an occasional food. And we've clarified the elements of the definition of targeting children. So the product itself, the nature of the advertisement, and so on, and that has already had quite a noticeable effect. We're already getting complaints under the new code and dealing with them at ad standards.
And I think that your approach is very good, the approach within Australia, and that's done in conjunction, I would assume, with the food industry, that you've worked closely with them in establishing these guidelines.
Yes, absolutely. Our colleagues at the Association of National Advertisers, who are the code developers, worked extremely closely with the industry and with government in establishing the new code, because, of course, it's important that government is reasonably happy with what we're doing. Otherwise, there is always going to be appetite, at least among the bureaucrats, if not elected politicians, for stepping in with direct regulation.
Well, thank you. Let's move to sustainability and environmental issues with Stefan. Stefan, advertising is seen as a companion to environmental transformation of companies themselves and the brands. And self-regulation can never be seen as slowing down transition within corporations and brands. The transition to greater sustainability is something that is desired and expected by many people around the world. The ARPP, self-regulation in France, has made several commitments about societal and corporate change. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, to be seen as a companion, or even more as a driving force above all, advertising must, we all know, refrain from greenwashing and more generally from ethical washing on all societal topics. The reinforcement commitment made publicly in France in consultation with the civil society aim to integrate a college of consumer, environmental and societal associations directly into our board of directors, for example. Or in the same way, this college is in the same way as the college of advertisers, agencies and college of media. It is also a commitment by brands and agencies to seek copy advice from ARP's legal counselors before broadcasting all their national campaigns, whatever the media is, regarding their environmental environmental claims, for example. And it means also for ARP to continue to publish monitoring of thousands of advertisements analyzed. We do it every year for many years, and we identify breaches of some rules, for example. It is also a commitment of speeding up the jury's decision in the case of serious breaches regarding mostly sustainability, but also presenting an annual report to the French Parliament and discussing with them with these points and discussing with the legislator, like Richard say. We need to have these strong links and discussions with self-regulation and regulation, of course.
So you actually present reports annually to the French government?
It will start now. It is within the law, the new law the new climate law, and we also will to do that starting this year in 2022. Yes,
it's very important. Mary, in the United States, environmental, social, corporate governance, ESG. There's been a lot of discussion surrounding that, and the need to make those concerns front and center. how are you seeing that reflected in advertising claims that are coming before the self-regulatory organization? And what's the approach within the BBB national programs to such claims, such as environmental claims and sustainability? We don't have the laws that they do in the EU.
Yeah, no, we don't have the same laws. We do, the Federal Trade Commission has guides on environmental marketing claims, which we follow closely. And yes, absolutely, as consumers are more concerned about ESG claims, environmental claims, especially with, climate change issues, we're seeing more advertising claims following suit. And so what we've done is brought a number of monitoring cases addressing those. We haven't seen as many competitor challenges in the environmental space yet, but we've been bringing them through our own monitoring. And in the case of sustainability, for example, there's no definition there, or the FTC's guides don't address those specifically. So we do what we usually do, which is step into the shoes of the consumer and provide a ordinary interpretation. And one of the issues there that we've seen is companies making the broad claim but not being specific enough about what the claim means. How is it sustainable? How it actually is this product having an environmental benefit, in what way? So that's, our cases have focused there, that the need to be specific, to be really clear and upfront with consumers about the actual benefits that this product is bringing.
Thank you.
Can I just make a point on, Carla, can I just make a point on the back of what Mary said? Because she talked about stepping into the shoes of the consumer. And I think that's a really important feature of advertising self-regulatory bodies around the world. And that it's sometimes not true of the law and the application of the law because of the way the law is constructed. I think all of us who are working for SROs, whether it's about environmental claims or any other issue, we're always trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the public, the audience of the ad, and ask ourselves what they're likely to interpret from the ad, what message are they going to get, and that can be different from the advertiser's intention. But it's really, really important that we put people at the heart of the regulation that we deliver.
And that has to be understood, because we call ourselves industry self-regulation. Too often people think that we're just industry, or and we're not at all. And we are protecting consumers, and it's all about moving toward the truth.
Yeah, and Richard, I think one of the issues, just go on. Right on that point, is the issue that we see so often is companies will have a disclosure or something that's in fine print, or it's in the back of the package, and ordinary consumers aren't going to be flipping over and looking there. So that's not going to be good enough. So we really do focus on what a typical consumer is going to be seeing and getting when they look at that ad or that package.
And this area of environmental green claims is still an evolution in the United States. It's an evolution in many countries around the world. But I wanted to jump to Richard, because he's had a code in Australia for the past 12 years on environmental claims, which is pretty awesome that you've had a code for 12 years. Tell us about that, Richard, please.
Well, actually, we're about to embark on a review of it, because it's long overdue. And I think what we'll focus on in the review is this very point about making sure that we're in the shoes of the consumer when we're assessing complaints of this kind, because one of the difficulties we face at the moment is our having to rely, not being a scientific body ourselves, on the substantiation that's provided by advertisers, or in some cases also by complainants. And really, when it comes down to it, our panel, which makes the decisions, it's a bunch of citizens, and they do exactly that. They'll just sit there and say, well, this is all very well, these pages of so-called substantiation, but what this ad says to me is this, and that's not fair or right or good enough. So we'll definitely be focusing on that in our review, I think.
Well, this area of environmental claims is one to watch, because it's certainly not going away.
No, we're getting increasing numbers of complaints and also competitor complaints about issues from emissions from electric vehicles, for example, recyclability, even a government information campaign about so-called clean hydrogen. So it's certainly increasing rapidly as an important issue.
I should put a footnote here, and tell the audience and speakers, of course, remind them that the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC, has just issued guidelines on environmental claim marketing with definition of terms. And it would be very important to, if you're doing environmental advertising or in the self-regulatory space, to check what the ICC has just issued on those guidelines. But ESG claims, gender, Manisha, in India, you've been engaged in some thought leadership on gender depictions and responsible advertising. Tell us about that in India.
Yes, so we recently undertook a fairly massive study to look at the depiction of gender in advertising, and it was a fairly detailed study. We spoke with all stakeholders. We looked at, of course, a lot of advertising, and essentially the objective of the study was not just to audit advertising, but also to kind of look at insights that came out of the study to provide new starting points to advertisers that maybe much more progressive than perhaps what they had been showing. And I think the study revealed exactly that women had in their own lives moved much ahead of what advertising was depicting them. And that advertising, at least in India, had to do a little bit of catching up to women's own lives and aspirations. And we kind of course, created a whole bunch of insights for advertisers to consider, and also created a framework that they could use to both identify ways in which they could look at more progressive depictions, but also help them identify some stereotypes, which were very, very subliminal and very kind of stubborn tropes that were kind of seen across advertising of different categories and just across time. So that's something that we did. I think the industry, kind of responded to it very well, and it's something we'll continue conversations on. And but yes, that's been some very interesting work that we've done,
and significant work in your country as well as globally that you've shared with ICAS. So I think it's important to share it here today. Let's talk about how SROs have evolved with technology and are using new tools such as artificial intelligence, and how do the SROs continue to serve the overall need of encouraging truth in advertising and evolve with technology to become more efficient and better? I'm going to ask both Stefan and Guy, and then go to Mary on this one, and then ask anyone else to pitch in. So first with Guy, how is ASA using technology?
We're using it a lot, and we've got quite big plans for the future as well. So we've got a couple of programs which we call avatar monitoring and CCTV style monitoring to monitor age inappropriate online ads for alcohol, gambling, food, time, fat, salt, sugar, e-cigarettes, cosmetic intervention advertising, that type of thing. This type of advertising are subject in the UK codes to prohibitions on targeting either under 18s or under 16s. One of the challenges of regulating paid ads online is we're all served different ads depending on our profiles. So how do we know who's being served what? Well, we built, with the avatar monitoring, for example, we built technology that creates avatars which mimic the profile of different aged children. And we then send those avatars to lots of websites and video channels, and we capture the ads that are served to those avatars, and we then filter them and assess them and take action against inappropriately targeted ads. We've also used technology that ARPP in France has kindly given us to capture paid ads, which we then run through an AI model that we built that predicts the likelihood of those paid ads being scam ads, so that we can alert platforms and networks to them, so they can take them down, as well as alerting the UK National Centre for Cybersecurity, which is a part of GCHQ, which is the UK's spy agency, which is pretty cool. I know we're not really talking about website claims, but we've also used technology in that area. We've used AI models to capture and filter claims, environmental claims made by companies on their own websites, for example. We've also used them on social media to capture organic Instagram posts promoting prescription-only medicines like Botox, which in the UK and Europe, you're not allowed to advertise to the public because they're prescription-only medicines. For influencers, we've used tech to capture influencer ads and AI models to filter them so that we can check that they're properly labeled. And we're in the early stages of building our own in-house data science team to complement the work that we do with third-party tech providers.
You have unfolded a lot there, and I want to see there should be a movie or a video of everything that you're doing, especially with these avatars going out. We are talking about website claims if they're making claims about products and if there's false claims, because that's advertising. And what you're doing is awesome. You referenced using technology or work done within the French. I'm going to go to Stefan and ask Stefan to talk about some of the dimensions and innovations of things going on that you've implemented to become more efficient and more meaningful. And it seems like you've shared some of your learning with your UK partners too.
Like you say, even Manisha said, we share our R&D with our, like ICAS, we are within a network, a European network, ASI, and then the international network. So we help each other to increase our knowledge, in fact, by these new technologies, because we have to be in tune with the industry, in fact, also. So, and we have to anticipate and identify their needs and our needs of self-regulation, because like we just said, when we put ourselves in the shoes of the receivers of the messages, for them, all communication is agnostic of the advertising technique. So we have to mirror what we did for many, many years, decades on the other medias, within the through media. The challenge, of course, is the volume. The challenge is the number of emitters of advertising, the new media. And we talked about influencers, but there are also many other ways of doing advertising now. But that's why we invest, and we have to thank the industry who help us to invest in these old technology Guy just described, because of course, we have to be all together, because it could be lots of investment and what we did. So we create the name Invenio in Latin, but the AI system is and of course we have to thank also the platforms, because we use their officials API, for example, when we monitor the influencers. We use their API just to try to, like a big net, fishing net, just to help. But on the other way, of course, we have to intervene, but we also need to educate most of these newcomers. So that's why we need to identify, to monitor, and sometimes to name and shame. This is our role as self-regulatory organizations.
The name and shame, the role of self-regulation, all for the good of advertising in the industry. Mary, very quickly, how have you navigated with new technology to become more efficient? Do you have avatars going out and finding your advertising problems?
We're looking at that for the children's space as well, because we were inspired by what the ASA was doing in UK. So we are looking at that. We also use web crawling technology to check out social media, the claims that are being made there, primarily for earnings claims and product claims in that space. And that's allowed us to keep up with whenever a new technology evolved, whether it was Instagram stories or TikTok or whatever, we've been able to keep on top of that. But also process-wise, what we did in response to digital technology was to create a whole fast track for challenges of issues in social media, disclosure issues, where decisions would be made within 20 days, 20 business days. And then most recently, we even created a separate lane within the fast track where the only issue in the case is whether the disclosure is adequate, whether it's clear and conspicuous or not. And that's often the issue with social media influencers, for example. Do they disclose that it's paid? And so we created a separate lane. We simplified the procedures for that and reduced the filing fee. So we were responding process-wise as well as technology-wise.
There's a lot of change going on. There's a lot of change. Richard, do you want to add anything quickly, or Manisha? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next section.
I'm happy for you to move on.
Yeah, you know, I'm blown away with avatars. Avatars going out and finding advertising issues. you have already alluded, you all have already have alluded to the fact that you're networked, that you're influenced by each other, that you're inspired by each other. ICAS provides a forum for that. Sybil, tell us about ICAS and how you network within this organization.
Yeah, so I guess, as I mentioned, it's really new network, but it's also huge in a way because our members have so much experience. So we really get together regularly. We do webinars, we have regular informal calls, we have information sharing, written, there are bilateral calls, working groups. So there is an exchange going on practically all the time within the network. So that SROs learn from each other, but we also have the discussion with the industry to find out about issues they are having and how we can address them. So, for example, now we're looking into how to help WFA with the Planet Pledge, talking about environmental claims. And when it comes, for example, to technology, you already heard how RPP and the ASA in the UK, but also SRC in the Netherlands, they have really collaborated and exchanged not only information, but actually real technology, which is an amazing example of collaboration. We really try to inspire our whole network to learn from it and to adopt this kind of technologies. And EASA, the European Advertising Standards Alliance, has a data-driven working group, which is a really, really great initiative. And ICAS tries to support it so that as a global network, we're really making sure that self-regulation evolves and responds to the needs of the consumers, society, and the industry.
And what I think is awesome is ICAS has awards annually where you recognize the most outstanding achievements and innovations from the different self-regulation organizations. And you provide those, you make those available to people, right, to review and to look at. And I think that would be something else that everyone should be aware of, because it's a great education, not only for self-regulatory organizations, but to see case studies. If you're an advertiser or an agency, to see the case studies from around the world. Manisha, India is fascinating, a country that I've never been lucky enough to visit yet. You have your own international community within India. You said that you're dealing with 22 different recognized languages. How do you deal with that?
Well, we do have a lot of translators, but so we have, so in fact, as part of our SOMO to monitoring service, we have over 500 TV channels that we need to monitor. We have over 700 publications, and of course, many of these are hyper local and in different dialects and different languages. But I think as a country, that's the reality that we have, and therefore the infrastructure is kind of geared to addressing that issue of languages. Of course, it is challenging sometimes when we have to translate what is in a local language to English or to Hindi, which most of our jury, for example, would understand, and sometimes we may miss out on nuances. But I think overall there is a well-oiled kind of mechanism to be able to manage that complexity.
It's awesome, and it's so different than what each one of you are dealing with such unique challenges, and you're all doing it for the same good purposes of helping the industry, helping advertising, helping brands establish an ethical platform to thrive. Advertising still remains the foundation of free communication, of a free press. And it's so important what we're doing, what you're doing. And before we take some audience questions, I want to do a quick round of questions with each of you, asking maybe the most important question. What do you think are the key challenges for the industry and your organization going forward? One or two, what do you think that a key challenge is for the industry and for self-regulation going forward? And I'll answer the question first, because I think a key challenge is to maintain self-regulation funding. And that's a key challenge. But Richard, I'll start with you. What do you think a key challenge is for the advertising industry and for self-regulation going forward?
Well, just from, with the self-regulator's hat on, I suppose I think a key challenge is the rapidity with which values are changing in our communities, and advertisers need to stay on top of that, as do regulators like us. And I'm a recovered government regulator too. I used to run the Australian version of Ofcom and the FCC. And I know now directly from my own experience how much more responsive to changes self-regulatory systems can be. And we need to make sure that everyone knows about us and what we do and how successfully we do what we do. And that's a challenge for us in Australia. I guess we're a victim of our own success in the sense that there are no disasters. People aren't complaining, but they're also largely, I'm afraid to say, unaware of the good work we do.
Very quickly, Stefan, key challenge for industry and self-regulation?
I think the key challenge could be that it is not new, but it is well understood that the virtual worlds are not world without rules. We know for esports, for example, and gaming, but of course all the metaverse or whatever. But the key challenges for self-regulation is the exponential volume of messages, the increase of the number of potential users of ads. But we also have to keep in mind that we have to refrain from, of course, the immediacy of the digital. We have to keep the cardinal principles of what is self-regulation. It's a contradictory debate also, self-regulation.
Okay. Very quickly, Mary?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with everything that's been said so far. All of those are challenges. And I think one of the challenges is also it goes to the point of having better advocacy for what we do, or making it better known, the work of self-regulation. Kind of ironically, for an advertising industry, maybe we're not the best at advertising ourselves and making clear the value that we provide and the benefits both to brands and to consumers and to the government that self-regulation provides. And so I think, especially where there's an era of maybe increased regulation, we need to really show the value that we bring and get that industry support, get people to pay for it, as you said, Carla.
Manisha, real quick.
Yeah, I think completely agree with what's been said. And I think, for us, I think the biggest challenge is, again, digital, and, how do we keep pace with just the change of, in the way advertising is happening. And maybe it's about going back to first principles, as many of us do when, you're faced with something new, you kind of go back and say, okay, what's fair in advertising, and you do that. But yes, that's a big challenge.
Guy, and then I'm going to end with Sybil.
I agree with everything that's been said. They're all really important challenges. The one I'm going to pick hasn't been mentioned, and it's to do with the climate. What role should advertising self-regulation play in the coming years to respond to concerns that advertising promotes unsustainable consumption, which is bad for our planet?
Sybil.
Yeah, again, agree with what has been said. Big challenge is the funding, but maybe what I'd like to really stress is the industry support that we need. Carla mentioned the SRO is your strange friend. I think it's a great and exciting friend. You should really go and support them and work with them if you don't do that, especially digital platforms. They have so great initiatives at local level in France, in the UK, where digital platforms and SRO do amazing things, but it doesn't happen everywhere. So we need to get there, that digital platforms get engaged at, in all the countries.
Yeah, we hope that this panel has made self-regulation less than a strange friend, that people have become a little acquainted with self-regulation and the role it plays as a foundation of a independent, thriving communication. We had a key question from someone in the audience about influencer marketing. If someone gives a gift to an influencer but doesn't tell them what the content is, does that have to be disclosed?
Yes.
The answer is yes. That's part of what is the disclosure that's necessary. And any gift, any connection has to be disclosed. You all are brilliant. We have a panel here around the world. We have people up in the middle of the night to share their expertise with the audience. I, on behalf of the International Advertising Association, I'm honored that you've all participated. It's been a pleasure to host this today, and thank you very much. It's a joy to be with you, and so proud to be part of self-regulation. Thank you for all you're doing to help the industry. Thank you all very much.
Thank
And I
you.
think that we
Thank you.
can all
Thank
go on with our
you.
day. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
There will be a
Thank
tape
you.
of this that will be made available. It will be taped and it will be made available through a link that the International Advertising Association, which I encourage you to join, will make available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.